Sup? Welcome to the Tedeschi Trucks podcast. This is episode number 42, and I am Adam Choit. To follow this show, it's at Tedeschi Trucks Podcast on Instagram, and I'm at Adam Choit on Instagram as well if you want to follow me. And of course, I have no affiliation with the band. This is not an official podcast for them or anything. I am just a fan, and if you're checking out this show, I'm guessing there's a pretty good chance that you might be too. So please be sure to subscribe and give the show a positive review on iTunes. Doing those things is definitely helpful for sure. So, today's guest is Jeff Wood. Per his Instagram, he is a poster artist, painter, screen printer, beadworker, and a tiny blip on the cosmic radar. Jeff has designed and created so much wonderful artwork over the years for Derek, Susan, TTB, Government Mule, Widespread Panic, and many more artists. His career and work is super impressive, and perhaps just as great is how much respect and admiration Jeff has for all the visual artists who have come before him, the music of TTB, other bands, and of course for the musicians themselves. We cover a lot, including Mr. Wood's connection to Native culture and history, High Times magazine, and much, much more. Let's just get into it. Here's Jeff Wood. Okay, so it's good to see you today, Jeff Wood. Thank you for joining me on the Zoom. I appreciate it.
I'm glad to be here.
Oh, how are you holding up? Happy New Year. It's 2021. We can still say it, right?
Yeah, we can still say it. It's just glad to get past 2020. Very traumatic,
I think so.
Traumatic year on many levels. So
I think for many people. But yeah. You're doing okay yourself, though?
Doing good. Getting back on track. Last year, I think I did 3, maybe 4 pieces of art the entire year. That's the least amount of art I've done since I was probably 14 years old. Just a string of circumstances. Of course, the pandemic started, and the day we went into lockdown, my father passed away from a heart attack.
I'm sorry.
Well, it's life, and he was 83 years old. My mother's 79, so at that point, taking care of family business became the focus of, seeing how all the work got canceled that week too. So it was like a whole week of adventures in one fell swoop. But so I spent the summer building a tiny house on my property. So some friends of mine could live there and kind of caretake the farm, which is about 20 miles from Athens, where I live now. And so, yeah, they moved there, and I spent all summer building this tiny house. We got it through in September. I took a few weeks off just to sort of regroup, and did a job for Foo Fighters for a show that I was supposed to have done in April that year. Foo Fighters were going to do a 25th anniversary tour at all the clubs that they originally did on the first tour in 95. And they were going to do it for the 40 Watt Club. So I was all excited. 40 Watt only holds about 400 people, I think. It's a tiny little club. And to be able to see Foo Fighters there was going to be quite an adventure, and get to do a poster and all this cool stuff. And it got canceled, and I'd already started the artwork. So Dave Grohl, being the man he is, got with all us artists. There was a whole crew of us that were involved in this. And he said, we're going to do it for a streaming tour coming up in the winter and the fall and winter. So we all jumped back in on them and started working again. And lo and behold, LA ignited with the virus again for the winter surge, and it got canceled again. So we were all kind of wondering, okay, we've got all these finished posters. What's going to happen? And Dave, being the man again, said, release them. And so they released a very few. And so I got to do that poster and took the holidays off for the first time in 18 years. I had worked for Jam Cruise and Cloud9 Productions from Jam Cruise 1, which Judy and I went on way back in the day, 2003, 2004. And so I had worked straight through the holidays for 18 years. My birthday's the day after Christmas. And so for those holidays, I was always printing when I was still printing my own stuff, and signing number packaging, delivering to containers to go for the ship. If we were going on the cruise, which we did the first 9 or 10 cruises, we would be on our way down. And so that was kind of strange this year, not having anything to do and actually just kind of doing nothing. I think I slept for 2 weeks and goofed off, played some video games, do the stuff.
You needed a break. Sounds like you needed a break,
I
though.
just needed a break, yeah. And well, I'm an obsessive. It's like this, you know. I've been in this game for. I'm 59 now. I started doing art when I was 14 and selling it. I got turned on from actually Stanley Mouse's hot rod stuff. I live right behind Atlanta International Dragway, or did at that time. Our house was about a mile as the crow flies from the drag strip. So when it opened up, I was probably 10 or somewhere around there, and I used to go see all the airbrush artists that were working there, and you know they were always airbrushing the Rat Fink, Ed Roth, and Stanley Mouse weirdo art on T-shirts with drag racers, and I was a little gearhead and loved it. And at 14, Mom took me down to Sears, and we bought a single action Badger airbrush, and I got some the wrong kind of paint, of course, because none of this stuff was perfected at that point. This was probably in 73, 72, somewhere in there, 71, and started airbrushing T-shirts and selling them to friends of mine at school for football games and pep rallies and stuff, and to make date money and whatever once I got in high school. So yeah, not doing anything for a year. Didn't feel like it, for one thing. Was just dealing with the pandemic and, you know, being an obsessive artist. And that's really the only way you make it in the business, is to be obsessive about it and work day and night. It was quite the switch of doing manual labor, building all day, and then switching back over to art was kind of foreign. I just didn't have it in me at that point. It was just a bad year, and learned a lot. I think the main word for 2020 for me was clarity.
That's good.
Yeah, it was one of those things that what important with life became very apparent, and which is live a little, don't work so much. So I got a laser last year, or year before that actually, but started working on it last year to do laser sculpts and big 3D pieces. And
that's new? Is that something new for you?
That was something new for me. It's something I'd wanted to do for a while. There's several artists out there that have been working in it. I go back and forth between Colorado quite a bit, and there's guys out there doing work on them. And I think it's Epilogue was one of the big laser companies, was in just north of Boulder, and or in the Front Range. And I wanted to go out there and visit and look at getting a laser. Wound up getting a Boss laser out of Florida, but I just wanted to do these things. They're beautiful. They make great wall pieces, and I was wanting to do some fine art. After being in the music industry art I did my first music poster, official music poster. I did some punk rock stuff in college, but it was just hand-built type stuff, stupid stuff for parties. The first official poster was done in 96, I think, for High Times magazine, which is a great story. The company I work for, Island Screenworks, we had the High Times account, and I flew to New York. Judy and I had just met online through the AOL Love Blind boards that had just opened up, and about 2 weeks after it opened up, actually, we bumped into each other online, and that was we just had our 25th anniversary yesterday.
Oh, congratulations.
And so we met 25 years ago on the Sunday before the Super Bowl and talked, and she had just moved up. We met on February. She moved up in May to Myrtle Beach, where I was living. She lived in Gulfport, Mississippi. She was born and raised around New Orleans. So she was a screen printer too, so that was good, worked out. She moved up to Myrtle Beach. I was the executive creative art director for Island Screenworks, a large, massive screen printing operation. So yeah, it was, we had the High Times account. I didn't really want to go to New York because I was flying back and forth up there constantly and working with different clients, and because we had a tie-dye operation outside Woodstock, run by my friend Mickey O'Kennedy and Marco Schuhan at that point. And Judy said, you need to go, take a break, get out of here, because I was nonstop in the studio. It was a massive studio. I had 14 artists working for me. And
Wow.
Yeah, we had 12 presses or something like in that place. I can't even remember how many. We were doing stuff with MTV and yada, yada. So I flew to New York and did a presentation. We were doing work for Steve at that point, High Times Magazine, T-shirts. So was in the room, and Steve Hager, who's still a good friend of mine, and I did the presentation, and Steve walked in, and I had the portfolio there that had a whole bunch of my native artwork in it, and he saw it, and he was like, oh, you do native artwork? Yeah. And he said, can you come into the boardroom? And I'm like, sure, and kind of apprehensive about that because Steve was a hero of mine. I'd been reading High Times magazines literally since probably around 1980 when I started college. And so I went in the boardroom, and here's, all Holstrom and the other crew that I had followed around on High Times all these years. And they had a big, huge cannabis cup piece of art on the little flip chart there. And it was an original Stanley Mouse painting. And it had a girl holding a pipe with a native war bonnet on with a ceremonial pipe, and it was stuffed full of pot. And he goes, well, Stanley did this piece, and John Trudell, the prophet, who was a huge hero of mine, was going to be one of the judges that year. And he was also part of the native crew that was approving the design, shot it down because you don't put pot in a ceremonial pipe. That's tobacco only and a very sacred thing. So he goes, we need a piece of art. They're not going to use Stanley's because of the imagery. Can you do us something? And I was like, sure, flipping out a bit. And he goes, I said, so when do you need this? And he goes, Friday. It was Tuesday.
Oh, no.
And so I got with the ad director I was with that I'd gone to the trip. And I said, hey, I'm flying home. And I hopped on the $69 flight out of Newark that night that we used constantly, and flew back to Myrtle Beach. 3 days later, there was a finished piece of art. I sent it off to them. It got approved. They loved it. It wound up on the cover of High Times. It was the first piece of illustrated art to ever be on the cover of High Times.
Wow, that's awesome.
And then I got to tell Stanley at an art show. Stanley and I are friends, got to know each other over the years, big poster art, shows and stuff, and wound up doing some collaborations for Widespread Panic, and a couple art, I think one art print. And I got to tell Stanley the story that I was the guy that did the artwork for when he did that. We had a good laugh about it. And so, yeah, inadvertently, Stanley Mouse got me into doing airbrush at 14. He got me my first professional poster job at 35, I think, and both inadvertently. So I owe a tremendous amount of gratitude to Stanley, because he's one of those people that his artwork inspired me to be where I'm at today. To get to work with him on those posters I did was a dream come true, of course. To get and sit in the upper story of a little house in Amsterdam overlooking a canal and smoke weed with John Trudell while he riffed on all of his adventures was another dream come true. So it was High Times, Steve Hager, Stanley Mouse. Of course, I love the work of Rick Griffin and all the big five original poster artists from San Francisco. But Stanley was this person who he opened doors and never even was there to open them. They just magically appeared because of Stanley. So I owe my career, and I openly say that to Stanley, my rock art career to Stanley, and to being an artist to my mom and dad, who are both folk artists. And they never really claimed to be artists. My dad just did weird sculptures out of, he just weld stuff together. They're still all over the farm right now as a constant reminder of him. And my mom was a certified porcelain instructor for doing ceramic porcelain. So she made porcelain, these exquisite porcelain dolls. And so I was around art. They always encouraged it. When I was unsure when I graduated high school, they pushed me and said, go into art. You want to do it, go into it. And I was like, yeah, but art, it's really hard to make money.
Just the opposite of most parents and kids, just so you know.
Yeah. And so I got an art scholarship to University of Georgia, which was a joke. I think it was $800. It wouldn't have paid for the first supplies for the first semester. So I also happened to get a package from the Art Institute of Atlanta, who would send, if you had any sort of money to pay for college at all or willing to borrow, Art Institute would send you a package type deal. They were a for-pay type art school. So I went out there, interviewed, did my little portfolio show. Of course, they said, yes, you're great. Come on, go to school here. So Mom didn't want me going to University of Georgia because it was a party school. And little did she know she was throwing me in the middle of Atlanta and I got into punk and new wave music at that point and metal. And little did she know she was throwing me right into the pits of hell as far as me going down the route of doing rock and roll art. So yeah, I had a good time in art school. I wished I had been a lot more serious about it, but I also went to so many music shows and saw so many bands now that I can't really look back and say I regret 1 minute of it. I saw bands that if I had missed back in the day, I would seriously not like myself right now. And I got to see most of the bands that I adored, loved, and got to meet a lot of those.
That's awesome. I was going to ask, who were some of the bands that you grew up, even before you were 14, and some of the music influences that you had in your life and around you, even before you dove into art, like basically as a profession so young? How did the music come in and out? I know you said punk, rock, a little bit in college, but what about before then?
My mom and dad were huge country music and bluegrass fans. So I went to my first concert in my mom's womb, and it was at a gym in Gainesville, a high school gym in Gainesville, Georgia, and it was Jerry Lee Lewis. And she was like, I was pregnant with you when I went and saw Jerry Lee at the gym in Gainesville. After that, it's like, for as long as I can remember, I went to music shows, and I got to see all the greats of traditional country music, your Tammy Wynette's and George Jones and Johnny Cash's and Loretta Lynn's and all of the bluegrass flats and Scruggs. And, it was just Hank Jr. when he was still singing his daddy's songs, and Conway Twitty and Willie Nelson. And all these I saw very early in their careers, in their, when they were at the height of their careers in the late 60s and stuff. So it was interesting that I was also raised in an evangelical church up until I was about 10, I think, 9 maybe. So I really got off on the monthly singings where they would bring in the gospel groups, the 5-man quartets and stuff, and I just loved it. I called it evangelical heavy metal because they were it was fire and brimstone type church, and it was just lots of people just having a good time, So when we got out of the church, I was in a records or a big department store in Atlanta. Mom and Dad had gone out there to do stuff, and I bought 2 albums. The first 2 pieces, I had stuff like Creedence Clearwater and all of the Beatles and stuff like that Mom had got in the 60s, but and turned me on to. But the first albums I bought personally was I bought Machine Head. I bought 3 albums that day in the store. I bought I bought Machine Head because of Smoke on the Water was on that album, and then I got Alice Cooper's $1 Billion Babies because it was a snakeskin billfold and it had a big dollar. I'd seen a friend of mine that had it and had the big $1 million bill in it. I had to have it. I didn't have no idea what the music sounded like. The radio stations that I listened to or were allowed to listen to then didn't play that. And I bought Kiss Alive, the first live album from Kiss. And another one I had a cousin had played Hotter Than Hell for me. I thought that was the most rock and roll thing I had heard at that point, because, oh my God, they're talking about hell. And my little evangelical brain was just breaking free of my religion. So those were my first 3 albums. And I had a cousin named David, who's passed now, but he was a biker. And he knew I was a total music freak. And he said, I'm going to take you for a show, And so he took me to a Black Sabbath show in Atlanta at a very young age. I was 13, I think, when I saw that show. I was supposed to be spending the night. He lived in a trailer across the road from my family farm. I was supposed to be spending the night with him, but he took me to a Black Sabbath show. He also took me to the first time I saw the Allman Brothers, which I was 14, I think, when I saw the Allman Brothers at the University of Georgia. I think it was Stegman Hall where I saw them. That was probably 74, 75, somewhere right in there. And it was all downhill from there. It's
downhill.
I got, from 74 until now, I'm a metalhead, and my tastes are pretty wild. When I'm in the studio, I listen to a lot of jazz, a lot of elevator music, jazz, light jazz. I also love, jazz standards, Sinatra, and then on the other end, I love Lamb of God and Slayer. So it's kind of whatever mood I'm in. And the strange thing is, my comfort food is my Southern rock and Southern roots of Allman Brothers and Tedeschi Trucks and Derek, and so it's like Government Mule. That whole family tree off of the Allman Brothers became. It was interesting how that all came to pass. I was at a festival, Gathering of the Vibes, in New York in 2003, I think, and we had gone up. Mickey O'Kennedy, who was a Grateful Dead artist, was a good friend of mine, and he had a gallery up there. And he said, "Why don't you bring some of your poster stuff up and put in the gallery, because all those bands you do work for, or you want to do work for, are going to be there." And I was like, "Okay, cool." So we were primarily working with venues direct, and not so much with merchandise with the bands. And I had the gallery, and this little guy came in. He looked like a gnome, and he came in. He goes, "You got any Greg Allman pieces?" And I was like, "Well, I got a Greg Allman and Friends poster I did for a club in D.C. called Nation." I said, we did a few for some advertisements for the guy. I said, "I think there's a couple over there if you're interested in them." He goes, "Yeah, I'll come back and do that." And he goes, "You got any Allman Brothers stuff?" And I was like, because they were playing, this was basically the Southern Rock Gathering of the Vibes that year. They had Dickie and the Allman Brothers and Government Mule, and you name all the Southern acts at that point. The New Orleans acts too were up there. And I said, "No," I said, I was going to do some work for those guys, but the guy who ran their merchandising company basically told me he'd sue me within an inch of my life if I ever tried to do, because I called him, I was doing a Godsmack poster, a Perfect Circle poster for a venue up there. And I called him because I knew he had the license to the band. And I was like, "Hey, you want to buy these posters? Because I got to do them for the venue, for the Theater of the Arts." And he was like, "No. And if you do them, I'm going to sue you within an inch of your life." And he gave me the whole rundown on how much he disliked poster artists at that point, and how we were scum and sucked the blood. I think his thing was we were ticks on the back of the bands. Which is bizarre, and I'll connect this down the road too. But I said, "Okay, cool, no problem," and so as I'm telling this little guy at Gathering of the Vibes about it, he goes, "Well," I said, "the guy was just a real prick to me, I was like, so the little guy goes, "Hey, yeah, every band needs their prick, and I was like, "Yeah, but man, I grew up. That was like one of my first concerts. These are like hometown heroes to me. I wasn't going to screw them over. I just wanted to do a piece of art for them to say I did a piece of art." And he stuck his hand out and he goes, "Kirk West." And I said, "Well, hey, Kirk, I'm Jeff Wood." And I had no idea who, the name was familiar, but I had no idea what Kirk looked like. And then it hit me, Kirk West. and Mickey O and all my friends back there, Mike Dubois, some more Dead artists had worked with Kurt with the band before, were cracking up because here I was just speaking right off the cuff, not giving a shit what I said. And here's I'm telling all this to the road manager for the Allman Brothers.
Yeah.
So Kirk is like, I tell you what, I'll make sure you get to do a poster for the brothers. And I know I was probably 6 shades of red at that point, feeling 2 inches tall when he walked off. But about a year went by, and then he contacted me and had me do the, I think it was the 45th anniversary tour poster and the promotional work for the band. And at the same show, I think, was when another friend of mine, Nadina Simon, who was one of the artists at Mad Magazine, was a huge Derek Trucks fan. And she had contacted Blake about doing art and had done, I think, a couple of pieces for Derek very early in the DDB days. So she's like, you need to contact this guy, Blake Budney, and see if you can, do some artwork for Derek, since she loved the brothers so much. And so when I got back, I wrote, and Blake was like, yeah, sure. And so I did that 2003 poster of Derek in the African attire because of the opening act. And it was at that point, Derek, Blake had me do all of their artwork for I don't know how many years. It was probably almost a decade. I did all their posters.
That's awesome. This all must have been so exciting for you to be working for, the Allman Brothers and then Derek and I'm looking at all the art, and it's awesome and amazing. And I want to hear about some more of the inspiration behind some of the designs and where that all comes from too.
Sure. Well, yeah, it was, and I had started doing work for Government Mule for the Deepest End at that point, and I had seen Government Mule in Myrtle Beach. Wow, that was probably 95 or somewhere. They were on one of their tours. They played a little surf club called Sandpipers, tiny little surfer bar. But I just stumbled into these. The promoter I was working with in Athens goes, hey, Government Mule is going to be playing the Classics Center. Can you do a poster? And I'm like, yeah. And for some reason that fell through, but they contacted me back and said, hey, we got a Deepest End show because Woody had passed and they were doing that memorial show. Do we want to do a special poster? So I called my friend Ralph Walters, who I did collaborations with, another artist at that point. And Ralph, I said, draw me a mule with a face mask scuba thing and give it to me and let me cut loose on it. And so he whipped that out, sent it to me. We had done some panic jobs together, and he had done that. And so I did those, and it just kind of all fell together. Derek's work was fun because they gave me no direction. It was just do what you love. So,
I believe that.
Yeah. So they didn't, a strange thing that Dave Schools had a thing of not telling the artists what to do because they don't tell us what to do on stage. We do what we do on stage. We're not going to hamper their creativity by telling them what to do on the poster, which all the work I've done through Panic through the years, the same thing. They kind of cut me loose and let me do what I want, and they let me establish some of my style artwork. And it was all in the developmental phase. It's this weird neo-tribal psychedelic stuff I do now started in a lot of the stuff I was doing for Derek. And one of my famous pieces is Mindbender, which was the 2 guitars that were all psychedelic. It was Derek and Susan's guitars from when they were doing Soul Stew, one of the first tours they did together. I don't even think it was called Soul Stew at the thing. I think it was Derek Trucks and Susan Tedeschi at that point. I did that piece and I called it Mindbender after the song. My daddy was a Gibson, my mama was a Fender. That's why they call me a Mindbender, a great Southern rock song from Stillwater, I think. And so I did that piece. It was a pretty psychedelic piece. I didn't know if they were going to take it because it's Southern blues, and here I am doing a hardcore psychedelic piece of art, and they loved it. And now it's like one of my iconic pieces. That piece has been done. I'm about to do a big art print of it. I did one art print back in several years after I did it for them, I reworked the piece, put more detail in it. We've got so many art prints lined up now to do, but that one's kind of on the back burners right now. But yeah, so Derek let me do it. They didn't want me to put band pictures on them, but I did on a couple, and they turned out. I thought one of my favorite posters is a picture of the Derek Trucks band with all their. It was a promo photo that I put with a fall poster with all. It was on black paper, and they were printed in metallic gold with all the leaves and fall colors behind it. Still love that poster. The one with the caricatures of all the band, which was awesome too. I did caricatures of all the band members, and because of that, I later did a folk art style painting of him and Susan with a guitar in the middle that looks like a typical folk art painting you would see to advertise a show on the side of a barn back in the day, and that's probably been one of my most popular Derek and Susan posters. It's kind of a holy grail poster because back in those days, I wasn't doing a whole lot of runs, big runs. What was done, particularly for those first Soul Stew posters. We didn't do a whole lot. We didn't know how many we were going to sell. We didn't want to have a whole lot of posters. So Blake and I were very conservative about the number of posters we were doing for them back then. Then I was on Jam Cruise, actually in our stateroom at Jam Cruise, and Kirk West calls me and says, what are you doing? And I was sitting on the deck. We hadn't pulled out of the Port of Miami yet, but the bands, I think it was Dirty Dozen, was playing on the stage down there, and I was sitting out there with a sketch pad drawing a tour poster for Susan. Her manager had got up with me through Derek. And
what year was it?
Oh, man. It's got it's a Hindi piece of art on it, flowers. I can't remember. I don't have my browser.
This is pre-Tedeschi Trucks Susan on a blues cruise type thing, you're saying?
Well, no, this was Jam Cruise. This was
Jam Cruise.
One of Cloud Nine's, yeah. And Susan and Derek weren't on the cruise, but I was just doing a tour poster. I had the work to do, and I had to get it done. So I worked on even when I was on the cruise. I was sitting there on the deck, drinking boat drinks and drawing this poster for her, so I'd have all the black line art ready when I got back to the studio.
Not a bad life.
Not a bad life. And then like a year or two later, Derek played Jam Cruise, and Susan came on, and that was the first time I had seen them together. And then Soul Stew was shortly after that, and then it just, exploded when Tedeschi Trucks came out. And at that point, it was, I was doing all the stages for them, which was great. Seeing them on stage with B.B. King, and here's my artwork up behind them. The Made Up My Mind with the locomotives and the bison was one of my favorite stage designs for them.
Dude, all these images are like a big part of like even my life, to be honest with you, as like a hardcore crazy fan, like who's just engrossed in all things Tedeschi Trucks. Like all these images, whether it's t-shirts or albums or just seeing them on the computer constantly, like all these images like are such like a big part of my life. And I'm like honored to like be talking to you, like for real, to like hear about the man behind like all these creations. And it's not just one, it's just like it's too many to even like talk about specifics. Like
it was crazy. For like I said, I've done work with Derek. I saw Derek come on stage with the Allman Brothers in like 91 or 2. He played Walnut Creek in Raleigh, and some friends of mine, we went, and I saw Derek come on. The guitar was probably taller than he was, and just blew me away. Who's this kid? Oh, it's Butch Trucks' nephew,
92, you said this was?
Somewhere right in there, yeah. And 91, 92. And I was about to move to Myrtle Beach, or had just moved to Myrtle Beach and drove back up to Raleigh to see that show with some friends because I hadn't seen the Allman Brothers in a long time and was really wanting to see them. And saw Derek there, as he progressed. We'd go see him at the Georgia Theater. I did the poster that wound up on the little sleeve, the paper sleeve of the CD they recorded for Live at Georgia Theater, which was artwork in the style of old jazz art. And it was just absolutely gorgeous piece of artwork. But it was another one of where that look influenced me so much that it got melded into this neo-tribal stuff of the color schemes and the way he worked with color. So it was just another progression down the road of taste testing all these looks that I loved and that just tweaked me art-wise and melding them into what I do now. And but Derek, it was great. They would always come out with an album, and they would send me a copy of it and go listen to that. And here's the artwork, and if you can kind of tie it to that. And I think there was only one that I did that was specifically the album art. It was just tweaked in my vision, and I kind of cut loose on that. And it was fun, and there's so much respect. I mean, Blake and Justine. Fu are like family. I mean, I've known these guys. I've done work for Derek since then. So now we're probably at 17 years or something. I've done work for Derek.
Oh, you were talking about the Derek Trucks Band album, I think.
Yeah.
That one. You've done all these.
It all kind of runs together now. I've done
DTB and TTB.
Yeah. So those two have been very much a part of my history, and very much. Them along with Panic have been like my most loyal clients, of where there's this.
That's great.
This huge trust issue of me doing good work for these bands, making the fans happy. It was always great going and delivering the poster for Derek and for TTB, and getting to see Chris again and hand the posters off to Derek's dad. And, hey, Chris, how you doing? And he'd be, marshaling that merch booth and selling stuff, and hang out for a few minutes and chat with him, hand off everything, go see the show, say hey to Derek and Susan. And a lot of times I would only stay for like half the show, or some of them I just would drop them off because I was, was on to the next job at that point. It's like I don't even have time to. I know I drove to Columbia thinking it was I drove to Columbia thinking it was a Columbia show, and it was in Charleston, or maybe.
Oh no.
Yeah, that's how scattered I was, because
You've needed this break for a long time, I think.
Yeah. So I got to the town and pulled up the email to see the address. It was like, oh, crap. No, it was Charlotte. I drove to Charlotte, and it was in Columbia. And I was like, oh, dude. So I was like, turn around and drove. I was going to actually catch dinner there, hang out a bit, see the show. And I got so aggravated with myself. It's like, I'm going to go drop the posters off and go home and go to bed, because I had been burning it at both ends that week. But yeah, they've been traditional. I love the music and the energy and everything about them. And it was an adventure going to their shows, because you never knew what they were going to play, particularly in the early years. A lot of traditional, Southern blues. And then they did we were at a Georgia Theater show, and it was very jazz based, which was like, I had not seen that. And it was like, I was in awe the whole show, going, I've never heard them do this type set before. And so yeah, it's always been an adventure with those guys, but it's just a huge amount of respect. And when I see them, there's hugs all around, and they, I love those guys. I hope they feel the same about me, but I definitely, just the respect factor of letting me be an artist and letting me kind of interpret the music and crank out work that I thought suited the band and my weird psychedelic style, which is, like I said, still kind of weird doing psychedelic art for such a traditional blues type band with heavy jazz influences. And here I am doing a, full-blown psychedelic. So
I think it all works, though. I think because a lot of what Tedeschi Trucks Band does, and Derek and Susan, is capture music from the past and a lot of the funk and psychedelic eras from the 60s and 70s. And and you sort of bring a modern twist even, but at the same time capturing a lot of that counterculture, sort of iconic styles into yours. So you got a lot of things that I think that are going on there that work for you. Does the band ever give you any sort of specific, or they obviously they keep hiring you, they must love what you do, but do they ever say things like, oh, I really love this poster because of XYZ or anything like that? Or is it just like, we love what you're doing, keep doing it?
Yeah, that's pretty much it. I mean, a little over a couple years ago, they switched to, of course, they've got to that level now. Well, merchandise is much huger than when I was working, in the very beginning with them. So they've got a merchandising. They work with a merch company now. So I don't do all the work anymore, and which is great because I'm kind of paring back the amount of work that I do now. But I'd still do one or two posters a year for them, much smaller level, like no big massive tours. At one point, I was just doing big, huge tour runs for them up until 2 or 3 years ago. I was doing all their tour posters, spring, summer, winter. We were doing series of posters, and they all matched, and you could get the whole series type deals. And now it's more specifics of like I think the last one I did was the February 14th Valentine's Day show, maybe in Washington, D.C., like a year or so ago, 2 years ago, that I put the big heart with the folk art heart on it. And yeah, so that was, I think, the last piece I'd done. I was going to do a Red Rocks poster for them last year when everything got canceled. So, and then when it got canceled, of course, everything went away. And it's really strange. This morning when I came in the computer and sat down, I opened the email up, and there was an email from Justine on there just checking in because we hadn't talked in a while. And she handled all the merch for those guys. And she was like, hey, we need to catch up, and we still want you to do some work. And I said, well, that's strange. I'm actually recording a podcast tonight to talk about the poster I've done for you guys. So she was like, so I'm looking forward to doing more work for them. So hopefully this coming year, fall, next spring, whenever we get back at some kind of new normal, I'll get to do another poster for them for sure.
Cool. What about is there any meaning that you could share, or, that goes sort of behind these symbols of like the bird and the leaf? I'm sure it's a specific kind of flying creature and a specific kind of leaf, but is there anything behind that you could share?
A lot of it, it's the poster that has the tree with the two birds sitting in it. That one was just with all the other birds sitting around them. That's the exact number. I think there's 11 birds in the tree for the band, every member of the band, and then there's Derek and Susan in the middle. Of course, the tree's got Spanish moss on it because their house in Jacksonville back in the swamps. So there's little things like that. The birds and the bisons of course came from the album art. And but yeah, I mean, a lot of it was just they'd tell me the album theme, and I would go, okay, cool, and then take it and run with it. Or those mandala type stacked totem pieces. Some of the last posters I did for the tours that were I think there was 3 in that set: a spring, a summer, and a fall, winter. Those were just me riffing on psychedelia, Art Nouveau-ish type pieces. That the one with the heart, with the dove, with the hands, the black and white hands clasped together, was what I call the brotherhood or the brotherly love poster, because all the racial stuff that was going on at that point, and how that band of all these mixed cultures and races was just the epitome of Southern music at that point. The spring poster was a rebirth poster. It was just pinks and greens and teals and blues and beautiful, and a hummingbird, I think, in the middle of a flower, and the flower was a typical swamp flower, another riff back swamp family music. And then the fall piece was the Derek's SG burning, which is a constant symbol. You'll see Derek's SG in the very first poster I did for him, in the African necklaces made up of SG guitars. Because the first time I saw the guy, he was a little kid with that SG, and so it's just been this iconic image. if you look closely at a lot of the stuff and you don't see it at first, you stare a little deeper, you'll start to see SGs and
I'm gonna look for it. I'm gonna look for it.
There's a lot of them snuck in there. But yeah, I mean, it's a lot of times I'm not one of these people who sketch out posters before I start. I generally sit down with a blank. I draw on a Cintiq monitor, which is a digital drawing table basically. So I don't really sit down with a pen and paper anymore. I do all the initial sketches in a pencil in a program called Clip Studio, and I just pencil it out on the computer and draw it. A lot of times it's just throw a bunch of color down, pull a bunch of reference up from the album or whatever, throw it down there, look at it, and start working. Whatever comes. Sometimes it happens in hours, sometimes it happens in weeks, but no, it's I kind of let the posters draw themselves. I just channel it, and that's kind of been my, it's not the most productive way to work. It takes a bit longer because I'm constantly changing my mind and jumping around from idea to idea. But
it works for you.
Yeah, and the magic happens. You hit this all of a sudden. The part about doing the posters is kind of magical because I'll start drawing with no direction of what I'm going besides, I've got to have, the album cover's got a steam locomotive and a bison charging it. Okay, so what am I going to do here? And, and I think that the Beacon poster had the bison standing out in the snow with, all the snow going around it because it was a winter poster in New York City. And I had drawn I had that bison as a piece of art I was going to do an art print with, and was like, no, I think this will work perfect because the album cover, and it's New York, and it's, got the city skyline and some buildings, I think, behind it. And it's got this buffalo.
Yeah, I got it right up right here. Yep.
So it was, and it was just, it worked, and then, like I said, it was on to the next piece. So yeah, sometimes there's a lot of thought put into them. Sometimes it's just what I call eye candy of me doing a piece that I had fun doing, of where I sat down and just started drawing. Those 3 totem posters, that the Brotherly Love and the Burning Guitar and the Spring poster, were all just me sitting down with no clue and going, okay, I want to do some of these stacked Nouveau pieces. I had been in a phase of doing a lot of those for different bands and that style work. And so it was like pulling imagery from my head of what the band meant, of how joyous it was for spring music, and their uplifting, and how they could burn it down on the blues songs, and how it's all about the peace and love of bringing people together with music on that, the Brotherly Love poster. Any meaning deeper than that, I let people come up with that. I have a my thing about doing posters is I started buying music posters when I was a kid, and every time, I walk in and see that Kiss poster on the wall, or that Black Sabbath poster, or whatever, it brought back a memory from where I got it. I was at a Kiss show in '76 in Fulton County Stadium for the Destroyer album, and I bought a foil poster of them, the classic Destroyer album cover. And every time I walked in, I still have that poster, still in my archives. Every time I see that poster, I can smell the beer and the pot smoke and the wet concrete from being in the upper deck of Fulton County Stadium watching that show. So when I started doing music posters, my whole thing was documenting a moment in time for people. It's a very sacred honor that I get to do. I get to draw as Stanley Mouse put it, I get to draw the face on the show. So they're going to remember the music, but when they see the image, it conjures the visual memories. So I want that guy who was, 23 and in college and went to that show and raged and had a great time, or met his wife to be, or his girlfriend that's turned into his wife. 20 years later, that poster's framed, hanging on his law office wall, and he looks up back to that concert when he was 23 years old, raging with his friends and getting taken away by the music. I don't care if he knows I drew it or not. It's not about that. It's about looking at that image on the wall and going, that time travel, that transport back to that moment. And because I know that's exactly the art that hangs in my studio. There's a lot of it not associated with specific memories. It's from artists I like and everything else. But it's like I've got a Frank Frazetta, Death Dealer poster with the guy, the big warrior on the horse that was on the cover of Molly Hatchet's album cover back, in the day when I was in high school and that album came out. I love Frank Frazetta because I was all into science fiction and fantasy art at that point. And here's this, it's Frank Frazetta, and I buy it. And I was at a Beta Club convention in Atlanta. Snuck over to the Omni to buy tickets to go see Molly Hatchet, and got in the elevator. And the road crew get in with these embroidered jackets, and it's got the Death Dealer embroidered on the back of it. And I'm just standing in awe, oh my God. I couldn't have picked band members out at that point. There may have been band members there too. All I knew is these guys had the laminates on because it was in the Omni Hotel across from the Omni here in Atlanta. And here I am with my little suit and tie on, at a Beta Club convention, wanting to be in blue jeans and a black T-shirt and ready to go to the show. Had to sneak out of the convention to go to the show. And it was
done.
Well done. Yeah. So, I got that painting that hangs on my wall, a screen print, big, beautiful fine art screen print of that hangs on my wall. And every time I look at it, it takes me back to standing in that elevator with all these roadies and crew members, band members from that tour. So that's what I want to do for other people. I want people to be able to look at the work I do. And like I said, whether they know I did it or not, it's not the ego trip. I want them to be able to document in that moment in time, get taken back, little time travel.
Is that something you've always felt or as strongly as you do now, or a sort of a lesson or something you've learned or that's come with like wisdom over time, or like, where does that insight come from? An attitude.
I think it was instilled in me in a very young age because all the country music shows we were going to, Mom was buying me, Willie Nelson T-shirts and Conway Twitty T-shirts, and I always would wear them a little while and then fold them up and put them in a drawer. But they're still in that drawer. Actually, I've got to salvage a lot of that stuff. But the posters and stuff I bought at a very young age meant so much to me. It was every concert I went to, I had to have the tour book. I had to be able to look back at that and reminisce over, oh yeah, that I was at that show, over time, particularly once I met some of my idols in the poster business, like Stanley, and Stanley's outlook of, I think in his freehand book, the opening page was, it says, he drew the man who drew the face on rock and roll. And that kind of resonated so strongly with me. It's like, not only was he the inspiration for what I did, but he pegged it. He drew the face on it, Frank Frazetta drew the face on Molly Hatchet. There was these, and Journey and these other bands, the Grateful Dead. He drew the face on those bands. When you think of the Grateful Dead, you think of Skulls and Roses. That was Stanley Mouse, and so later in my career, when I started doing the neo-tribal stuff, the belly dancer, Native American, Aboriginal mishmash of art that I kind of throw together in those pieces, I wanted to have pieces that resonated with fans of bands. So, if you Panic, for example, with the Red Hot Mama, which was a belly dancer muse of mine. She was a very young girl, goth metal belly dancer out of Vancouver, named Farouk. I had seen pictures of her and wrote her and said, "Hey, can I use that picture?" Did the drawing of it, and it wound up on a show poster for Panic. And the band member or the fans started calling it Red Hot Mama after their cover of the Parliament song. So it was like it became known as Red Hot Mama. I never intended it to be that. Now it's one of the iconic images for the band. Mindbender, not to my knowledge has Derek and Susan ever covered Mindbender, but everybody that sees it now knows that's Derek Trucks and Susan Tedeschi. Oh, I saw that. I know where that. Oh, you see these little moments of recognition from it. So that's cool. That's the iconic part, and the little ego tweak that I get of doing these signature pieces of artwork that become iconic pieces for me as an artist, but also become iconic pieces for the band. So
that's
that
awesome.
when people look back at that art, like I say, they may not know who drew it, but they recognize it instantly as a Derek Trucks poster or a TTB poster or a Panic poster or, string. I do a lot of work with a string cheese poster or something. So, yeah, it's fun having that connection to the bands and to the scene itself.
Yeah, you're a pro's pro, and I could see why Susan and Derek want to work with you over and over again, just by the respect and care and diligence and that you take with every single project. And you approach your posters with the same sort of mentality and that it seems like the band does to their music, the same care that you want to capture. You're trying to capture a feeling. That's the feeling that they're trying to capture a feeling and say something with their music, and you're trying to do it sounds like yourself and have it match up and with what they're doing. And I think you're doing it. I think it's
thank you.
I love all the work. It's awesome.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's fun. It's fun playing off some of the band members too. It's I know certain things. Derek's necklace that he wears with the feathers that he had them made by that artist, and they gave them out to all the band members. So all the band members have those eagle feather pendants they wear, and you'll see those feathers get worked into there's a lot of eagle feathers worked into Derek's artwork and stuff, and it all comes from that because I heard the story about him having those made and noticed they gave them out to all the band members. So I started putting those images into those eagle feathers into his thing because he has this love for native style artwork. So, Ryan Stasek from Humphreys he's a gearhead and loves hot rods. So one of my Asheville posters has a big Dodge Charger or Challenger on it, and then another one with a big full blown motor on it. So it's a lot of times looking at the band members themselves and going, what are they into?
Yeah, that speaks to you as a person, I think, as an artist, both of those things, that you're a good observer, but you're also interested in what other people are interested in, which is a good thing.
Yeah. Well, it's like after doing this, I started doing music posters in 96, professionally in 98 or 99. So after all these years of doing music posters, you go to the well, being an artist is not a normal job. I don't get when I was printing, it was great. I just ran the prints through the press every how many times to lay down all the colors, and that was great. And it was just production work. It was obsessive production work because I was tweaking the job the whole time. Making sure everything was getting printed right. But doing the artwork itself is, it's like pulling it out of the ether. It has to come from somewhere. It's one of the few jobs in the world where it's not, I've got to make this cake, or I've got to do this. Not that there's not artistry in that. There very much is. And whether you're a cook, a chef, a whatever, a car mechanic. But for an artist, it's like we conjure out of the ether. It has to come from somewhere. It just starts from absolutely nothing, just a fleeting thought, and it has to be channeled into a physical presence. So after you've done so many of these things, and you've gone to the well so many times that you start going, well, what else am I going to draw? I did 18 Jam Cruise posters. I think I've run the gamut of what you could put on a sea-themed, boat-themed poster. But yet I'm so looking forward, to doing another poster like that.
You love the challenge.
Well, it's the challenge, and sometimes you just get to the point where you just burn out and go, oh, my God, I got to do this again. What am I going to do, And I jumped around. I would emulate art heroes of mine. There's a Black Crowes Oasis poster that I've mishmashed some Rick Griffin artwork into a brand piece and dedicated the poster. I do homage posters of where art heroes of mine and people that I love, I'll go do a piece of artwork based around their art or their art style and dedicate the poster to them. Somebody like Griffin, a lot of the Deadheads knew exactly who Griffin was. They recognize the piece. If they didn't, they look at it and they go, oh, that's a cool piece of art. And they look at the bottom and they go, oh, dedicated to Rick Griffin. They go look at Rick Griffin's page and all of a sudden they're going, oh my God, that's the skull from that Griffin piece. And it's that little tie back. And I love doing that. You know, it's like, particularly to heroes of mine in the art world that I just love their artwork, whatever style, hot rod, surf, Aboriginal, Native American. I will tie these little pieces in, and when people recognize them, it's kind of cool because some people will probably never see some of the things that I know that I pulled directly from a piece of art, redrew it in a style, and then put it in there and was like, this is, you know,
like what musicians do.
Exactly. And so it gets to that point of where all that develops style too. You know, it's like the more I airbrushed a lot like Stanley back when I was 14 to 21 or something. And then I got into pen and ink artwork. Then I got into screen printing. And screen printing, you didn't really do a whole lot of airbrush style artwork. So it was a whole different style. So just shifting around and finding my footing, my native roots are from around the early 1700s. So, you know, I know that through family history, but it's like I've never claimed to be Native American because I'm not. I just have native roots. Call it genetic memory at that point of where we can track the family history back to it. But I fell in love with native art when I was my early teens, particularly with Oscar Howe and Black Bear Boson and Woody Crumbo, these native artists out of Oklahoma, North Dakota, Nebraska, just loved their work. And I was in the Boy Scouts in the Order of the Arrow at that point and doing native dancing, competition dancing. I started running the powwow circuit. That's what got me all tweaked on native artwork. And I was airbrushing at powwows. And so I started doing all this artwork. And later, I was at Bonnaroo, and Derek Matthews and his wife Lita came walking into our booth, and he said, "Oh, it's native artwork." And it's like, well, yeah. I kind of gave him the story of that I had lived with the Lumbees in North Carolina. Had no idea I was. Those were my direct native, you know, distant cousins. And lived in Union Chapel where the Wood family lived of Lumbee tradition. And those were descendants of the same Wood that I was a descendant of. So it was really weird how that all worked out. But he came in and he goes, hey, there's native artwork. And yeah, it's native artwork. And he goes, well, I'm Derek Matthews. I run Gathering of the Nations, which is the largest powwow in the world. Do you want to do the poster for it? And they're big Deadheads. It was at Bonnaroo to see the Dead. And I wound up doing a poster for the Gathering of the Nations, and I had gone to one Gathering of the Nations when I was still running the powwow circuit. That was like a high times moment. It was one of those dream come trues of, oh my God, I'm doing the poster for Gathering of the Nations. And strange thing was, that was the first year we went to Burning Man in 2006. We went to Burning Man, and we were driving back through the New Mexico desert in the middle of nowhere. I mean, some little dusty desert road, driving back to take a shortcut through the desert, and here's a billboard with my poster for Gathering of the Nations on it outside the reservation and the Navajo reservation there. And I was like, okay, my mind is officially blown now, because the powwow happened in April and this was August. So it had still up after all those months. And I was like, I was just waiting for me to see it. You know?
I guess so. You needed to see it. Was that the biggest size you've ever seen in an image that you created?
There was plenty. Yeah, there was plenty of stages done by that point of seeing massive stages. You know, Derek stages, jam cruises, a lot of stuff for Cloud9,
right?
The big stage setups. So I had just started doing it. I mean, Dave Crossland, who is an independent comic book artist, was a friend of mine back. The 2000, right around that period. He and I did an Incubus poster together for a show in Philly at the Trocadero or somewhere, and we did an angel that he did a fairy that was caught in a spider web. He's a tremendous artist, just phenomenally good, and his pieces are emotional. When you look at them, they just reek of emotion. They make you feel stuff so deeply. So here's this fairy that looks like she's completely given out. She's just caught in this web. We did the poster. It was a promotional poster, not for merch or anything. It's just to advertise the show. We had a few that would always sell to make money to cover for the print run. Then we were on for the rest of it. We didn't really make money. We scraped by during that period of my career. Lived on 2 credit cards, basically. And then I get a call out of the blue from Incubus's management going, we always make sure the band got some in their dressing room for the show, and had our web address and stuff. And he wrote me and then called me and said, we want to license that piece to use as our stage backdrop on this tour. I can't remember which tour it was, but so that was a huge one for Dave in particular.
Literally
yeah,
a huge.
Because he was a huge Incubus fan. I had done another Incubus piece. I do a lot of work with 311 and had same thing, 311 since the day. Saw him in 94, 95 at my boss's club in Myrtle Beach called the Headroom, and started doing work for them. But yeah, I'd done work for Incubus before, but that piece in particular was special because it was the first big stage thing that I had ever done. And it really, I just colored the artwork. Dave drew the piece. So yeah, it's always cool to see your artwork big like that. Being in Amsterdam at a Cannabis Cup, and I'm a huge Patti Smith fan, and Patti had flown in. She had opened for U2 at Madison Square Garden and flew over to do the Cup because she and Steve Hager were old friends from East Village. And so I got to meet Patti, which was a total fanboy moment for me because she's like the punk rock goddess and poet laureate, and I just love her to death. To this day, she's like my serious girl crush. And to see her on stage, it's like she came on stage and half the people at the Cannabis Cup left because they were all younger kids. There was this appreciation for, this icon. I don't think half of them even knew who she was. So I'm in a half-empty club, the Melkweg, with Patti Smith on stage and my Cannabis Cup poster huge behind her, and me just standing there in awe of this going, this is why I do this. This right here, this is why I do this. This is my little, nobody else is having this ego trip right now but me. I'm standing here. I got a good buzz on. I'm in Amsterdam. It's great. And I'm standing here watching one of my icons in front of my piece of art, and yeah, that was a rush. Those moments are I think that's why every artist that does poster art does this. It's not, we don't do it. We document moments for other people, but those moments in particular of being at a Derek show and the stage, the curtains come back and there's my locomotive and bison, or the eagle flying with all the psychedelic bands and the lights playing off of it. The hair standing on the back of my neck right now. It happens. It's just one of those things that I did that, or going into a store and picking up a DVD and, hey, there's your artwork on the cover of that DVD from that live show. New Year's Eve this year, I had done a piece for String Cheese. We didn't do any posters for String Cheese because there weren't any shows this year, but they came to me and said, we want to do a 2020 commemorative poster. We want an uplifting poster, this, that, and the other. I think they're going to stream a show on New Year's Eve. I was like, okay, cool. So I did it. And so I went to bed early that night because I was tired. So I'm laying in bed with the TV remote, flipping through the TV, and there's my poster. And it's String Cheese. Their live stream their stream was about to start. And I'm like, oh, there's my poster. Buy your poster right now from Jeff Wood.
Wow. Like it was, you finished it and then moments later it was.
No, I finished it and shipped it in.
Okay.
So they could do the promotional work for the thing. But I didn't really think anything else about it. I'm a YouTube freak. I really don't watch TV. I watch YouTube
Yeah, like me.
videos and weird. I have a short attention span when it comes to that.
Like me.
Yeah, dude, it's totally. I'll play video games for hours and hours and hours if it's a good storyline on the video game. But when it comes, if it's not a Star Wars movie or a Lord of the Rings or something, I'm going to really crawl into because I love those properties. I have a short attention span. But yeah, I was just trolling through music that night to see whose live shows were up. I was somebody's going to be doing a live stream somewhere, and boom, there's the string cheese poster. So it was like, wow, here's another one of those moments of going, wow, I did that. That's wild, dude. You got a poster. It's up on the World Wide Web, and millions of people can see this all across the world. So the impact of that, it hits you every once in a while as an artist, of going, these pieces I've done, sometimes you have no idea the reach they have. I did a poster.
Sure.
I did a poster for Yonder Mountain String Band because Josh Moore, the guy who ran Joe Moore Productions here in Athens back in the day, knew I loved bluegrass. Because I said, oh, yeah, I was raised on bluegrass. Love it. He goes, well, you got to hear this hippie bluegrass. These guys cover Pink Floyd and bluegrass. I'm like, oh, crazy. I'll go to the show. I did the poster and got there. And then I sent some posters to management in Colorado and Nederland. And Sky McDonald, their manager, calls me and he's like, dude, I can't believe you did a poster for us. And I had just started working in the jam scene at that point. I had done a few Panic posters and a Government Mule poster, not really understanding the extent of how far those posters had gone out into the world. And he goes, I got the Panic poster framed behind, 2 of your Panic posters from Red Rocks framed behind my desk right now. I can't believe you did a poster for us. And it was weird because at that point, I was like, wow, these posters are places I had never really thought about before. And that meant a lot because at that point I knew I was doing something right. I was putting it into people's hands. I'd done punk rock posters, God, for the 40 watt, you name it, we'd done punk rock posters. Didn't sell hardly any. They're cool posters, still love them dearly. But the reach never got the reach that it got in the jam band community. And I think that was because, and I credit the Dead fully with this, is because the Dead and Bill Graham and Chet went out and they did poster art. And the jam band community and the hippie community latched onto poster art at the very beginning. And
right.
because of that, it opened the door. There was not, when I got into doing jam band posters, there's really not that many screen prints being done in the jam band community. And I remember standing at the deck, on the back deck in the theater during the Yonder Mountain show and looking at Judy and going, I'm an idiot. We're in the wrong field here. We got to stop doing punk rock posters and start doing jam band posters. And we started laughing. And then Jeff Austin and the band came up afterwards and, was talking to me about doing more posters for them. And I wound up doing some very iconic work for them and some iconic work for them that also is iconic work for me. My dad holding a mason jar full of moonshine was on one of their tour posters and T-shirts and everything. And that poster right now means more than the world to me now that he's gone. So I look at it and it brings back those memories of me posing him with that mason jar full of moonshine. And us taking hits off of it. So, it was.
I appreciate you sharing all that for sure.
That's good
stories,
stuff.
Great stories.
That's the poster stuff, and that's what it's about.
Oh, for sure. And what about the future looking ahead? I know you mentioned some other mixed medias and sculpting and laser sculpting you mentioned, and wanting to do some more TTV stuff, but what's kind of ahead for you?
Well, I'm doing a KISS poster. That's the next big job up, and 13-year-old Jeff is ecstatic about that, especially since that was one of his first big arena shows. So I got a KISS poster coming up, a few other licensed products, big licensed band posters to do. Seeing as how there's no live music this year, maybe later this year, it'll probably be licensed, a few, 6 to 8 licensed posters this year. A couple of the bands will probably do some licensed work. Not a whole lot beyond that. The rest of it is we're going to be selling off a lot of the archive because we have way too many posters in the archive of my own stuff, other artists who are friends of mine that I've collected through the years that I know I'm never going to frame. and it's a shame to have them sitting in a drawer somewhere when they really should be on somebody's wall. So we're going to sell off a tremendous amount of the archive, kind of let that carry the financial weight for the studio this year. And getting more into the laser work. I do stencil graffiti style art paintings. So the laser, I had worn my fingers out cutting stencils over the years to the tips of my fingers are numb from holding X-Acto blades. When I bought that laser, one of the reasons I bought it was so I could set my stencils up in Adobe Illustrator and send them to the laser and cut my stencils with the laser, which will speed it up. Then when I screw one up or it gets too gunky to use anymore, I can just cut a new one. So going to be doing a bunch of those original paintings. We have a whole lot of people wanting originals. I'm not the kind of person that wants to do a $3,000 or $4,000, $10,000 original painting. I want to do a $300 or $400 original painting that somebody can afford and hang on their wall, particularly if they've been a fan of mine for a while. So that's kind of the direction I'm going in, is doing some smaller mini prints, more affordable prints. The big thing now is people, because particularly if they're a big collector, no matter what band, if they're in the jam scene, they got a ton of posters. They don't have wall space anymore, so we're going to downsize some of the prints down to 8x10s and 9x12 little art prints for them to hang on their wall. It won't take up a whole lot of space, and they'll be more affordable. And in these times, that's very important. So it's just kind of restructuring everything now and finding our footing again. The art business is still doing good, miraculously. We'll see if it hangs in there. That's what we're hoping to do. So that's cool. That's kind of where we're at right now.
Good stuff. Yeah, you sound like you're a busy man, so I definitely, again, appreciate the time and all the stories and the info and the insight. It's been fun. Why don't you tell people where they could find you, follow you, anything else you want to share? I'll kind of give you the floor for that.
Of course, they can find me on the Facebook and the Instagram, Jeff Wood on both of those, and then ZenDragonGallery.com is where we sell all the posters. We're going to be opening up the archives and putting a whole lot of stuff up there, and that's where the big new original pieces will be when I start cranking those out. Hopefully, in another month or so, those first ones are going to hit. We just got to we're in the process of moving from one studio warehouse that we did all the fulfillment and the laser cutter into our new studio in the house. We're moving it all in-house again, and so we're in the process of that. But in another month, yeah, and the gallery's always open 24/7. Drop in and drop some cash. I'd greatly appreciate it.
Cool. Yeah, Zen Mystic Studio I see on Instagram. If you're on a page, and you'll know if you're on the right Jeff Wood page, yeah, based on all the artwork, you'll know if you're in the right place for sure.
Good.
Sweet. Well, again, thank you. It's been fun, and I'll let you enjoy the rest of your evening. I know you're on the East Coast, and so it's a little later, but it sounds like you got plenty to get back to work on. So thanks again, and let's talk soon.
Thank you. It's great being here.
Oh, for sure. So there you go. My conversation with Jeff Wood. That was fun. I really appreciate his time for sure. It was a pleasure to hear so much insight into the life of a man who has created so many images that are really a big part of my life, like I was mentioning in the episode. Anyway, for now, hope everyone out there is hanging in there so far this year. Happy New Year again. It's almost February. Wow, okay. For now, check out Tedeschi Trucks Podcast on Instagram. That's at Tedeschi Trucks Podcast. And of course, remember to tap subscribe or follow on iTunes, Spotify, or via whichever way you listen to this episode. And again, positive reviews on iTunes are greatly appreciated. I also have another podcast that's called People We Love, and what I do is interview people from all walks of life, most often comedians and other artists, about their lives and careers. The conversation is casual, but it's definitely a lot of fun, so you should definitely check that out too. PeopleWeLovePodcast.com, and the Instagram for that is at PeopleWeLovePodcast. And I'm on Instagram and Twitter at Adam Choit if you want to follow me. But I think that's about all I got for today. Again, thanks for listening, everyone. Really appreciate all the support. Later.